Oral questions by members.
Leader of the Official Opposition.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's a year ago this month, in July of 2019, that the first sign of massive increases in strata condo insurance premiums showed up. It accelerated through the rest of 2019, and the crisis is now fully developed in 2020. The question is very simple to the Premier. When can the 1.5 million citizens of this province who live in strata condominiums expect some financial relief from this province?
Premier.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker. And I thank the Leader of the Opposition for his question, and I fully appreciate that this is a grave situation for many countless numbers of strata participants right across the province, and it's been a challenge we've been working on very diligently for the past number of months. The member will also know that we are in the grips of a global pandemic. And that's not to say that we can't do many things at one time, but we are doing systematically the best we can to do a number of things. Firstly, we're trying to make sure we keep people safe. We're focusing on making sure that as we rebuild the economy, immediate relief was available for those that were drastically affected by COVID-19. At the same time, the Minister of Housing and the Minister of Finance put together a package of changes to legislation to make it easier and better for those that are struggling at this very moment. There's much more to do. I'm not suggesting for a second that we are complete the task, but the task is underway, and I am grateful that members on the other side have awoken to this issue as well. And I believe that if we work together, we put our shoulders to the grindstone, we'll come up with solutions for the people that are in grave distress right now. But this is a private sector failure, Honourable Member. I'm certain that you understand that. And so the challenge is not just in British Columbia, it's right across the country. It's grave here, and we're going to work as hard as we can to resolve that for the people that care about it and are concerned about it and are counting on government to give them a hand.
Leader of the Official Opposition on a supplemental.
Well, Mr. Speaker, with all due respect, that was a complete evasion. The question is very simple. Can the 1.5 million British Columbians who live in strata condominiums expect financial relief in the foreseeable future from this government or not? Yes or no?
Premier.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker. And I think it diminishes the Leader of the Opposition to say that the question is very simple. It's not simple. If it were simple, we would have resolved it by now. In fact, we would have had a bevy of ideas coming from the other side. I hear now that the Leader of the Opposition and his crew seem to think that we should nationalize the private sector insurance companies. That is a novel change from the positions that they've held in the past. It's a serious issue. It's not a simple issue, and we're working as hard as we can on it. We're going to continue to do that through the summer, into the fall, and into next year until we can get it right.
Leader of the Official Opposition on a second supplemental.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Still no answer. Simple question. Can British Columbians expect relief from strata condominium insurance increases or not? Yes or no, Premier?
Premier.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker. I thought for the past 4 months everyone was paying attention to the world environment that we are a part of. I thought that for the past 4 months every member of this legislature understood what the consequences of global pandemic meant, not just to the resources of this province, but to the resources of Canada. So to suggest that there's a simple solution to a private sector market failure is surprising. Surprising, coming from a group of people who profess to put up the flag of free enterprise every morning, salute it and say, be damned helping regular people, the market will resolve it. Apparently not in this instance, and that's why we're working so hard on this side of the House to get it right.
Member for Kamloops South Thompson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, obviously the answer from the Premier is no. There's no relief forthcoming. Bob and Susan are pensioners in Kelowna, and they've received their insurance renewal, and they can't afford it. Through you, Mr. Speaker, so the Premier here says loud and clear, their water deductible is going up from $15,000 to $150,000. Their premium is going from $84,000 to $387,000, and the net effect of this on their pocketbooks is an additional $200 per month in monthly strata fees. They cannot afford it. Now, all week, the housing minister has boasted about just how pleased the international insurance sector is with the government's Strata Action Plan. On Monday, she said, and I quote, "It's about making sure that the insurance sector has some comfort in knowing that they too can make money," end quote. Does the Premier agree with his minister's statement?
Minister of Municipal Affairs and Housing.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And as I said before in this House, this is a problem that has been years in the making, and there have been some serious gaps left behind by the previous government. We tasked the BC Financial Services Authority to dig into this issue, to make some recommendations, which they have. They've provided us with an interim report. We are acting on those recommendations. There's legislation before the House. I look forward to debating that legislation. And we're going to continue to work on this issue so that we can get it right for the people of this province.
Kamloops South Thompson on a supplemental.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, we'll assume that the Premier must agree with the Minister's statement if he's not going to stand up and say otherwise. The fact of the matter is that the legislation that the Minister keeps referring to does absolutely nothing to provide relief that people need today. In fact, 14 of the bill's 16 sections are actually dependent on the development of more regulation and consultations that the government plans on having, which could take months, potentially years. An empty bill is not a solution. But don't take my word for it, Mr. Speaker. This is what the Finance Minister had to say about this issue just last March. She said, and I quote, "Bringing forward a bill that does nothing to address the pressures that are being faced does not make a good solution." End quote. Well, Mr. Speaker, the government has done exactly this. They've brought forward an action plan. They've tabled a bill that does nothing to address the pressures that thousands of British Columbians are facing. So again, to the Premier, will the Premier provide immediate relief for the thousands of British Columbians who need it today?
Minister of Municipal Affairs and Housing.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. We know that people are struggling today. We know that, and we hear them. And that is why we tasked the BC Financial Services Authority to work diligently, to work quickly, to develop the recommendations. And of course, there's more work to do. There's absolutely more work to do to get it right. But we want to make sure, Honourable Speaker, that part of what we're doing is mitigating the risk so that we can actually get the kind of insurance that people need, that they can afford. And so we're taking steps to do just that, Honourable Speaker. And I look forward to debating the bill, getting it passed quickly through the House so that we can get to work and we can resolve this for people in British Columbia. We're expecting the final report in the coming months. I look forward to continuing to act on this file so that we can bring, again, relief to the people who are continuing to struggle with affordability of insurance products.
Leader, third party.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As BC addresses the health crisis caused by COVID-19, the most pressing issue becomes, like for the rest of the world, the economic crisis in rebuilding our economy. The $1.5 billion stimulus package that the government is preparing to spend invests a substantial amount of capital into our economy to precipitate foundational changes. As we know, we can't afford to go back to business as usual because going back means being unprepared for what's ahead. The health crisis has highlighted the many areas in our society and economy that lack resilience. In many cases, our lack of local technological and manufacturing capabilities has forced us to rely on fragile global supply chains. The final report from BC's first Innovation Commissioner points to an opportunity to use Clean BC as an economic driver by incenting made-in-BC solutions to help us meet our climate targets. We can develop and strengthen our domestic supply chains while lowering GHG emissions. My question through you, Honourable Speaker, is to the Minister of Jobs, Economic Development and Competitiveness. Is her ministry developing a concrete proposal for how stimulus spending can enact this recommendation to use Clean BC as an economic driver in recovery that can also help us build greater resilience in local supply chains?
Minister of Jobs and Economic Development.
Thank you very much, Honourable Speaker, and thank you, the member, for the question. And I know that he's very interested in this topic because we've actually been talking about it over the last few months. And in a short word, the answer to his question is yes. This is very important. I think COVID-19 has shown us all, and Dr. Winter is absolutely correct to point out that supply chains, global supply chains have been disrupted, and we have to do more to localize those supply chains, bring that production closer to home. And so some of the things that we already started doing during the height of the pandemic was create a supply hub. Now, this supply hub was helping get people who needed medical PPE, helping them get medical PPE, but other types of supplies. And the people that created that were right here in British Columbia. Traction on Demand, which is a British Columbia company headed by a young man who originated from Nelson. Have to put that in there, Honourable Speaker. This company put together the supply hub in partnership with our government. There were other BC companies who were also a part of this important project. Westlab in Surrey, Breathe Medical in Kelowna, Westbound Industries in Delta, Prototype Integrated Solutions in Langley were all contributing to this important initiative that allowed greater supply chains here locally in British Columbia. Going forward, we know how important innovation, as the Innovation Commissioner our former Innovation Commissioner pointed out, is going to be for future economy. And we've already appointed the member for Delta North. He's already the Parliamentary Secretary, giving him the added responsibility for expanding and growing our mass timber industry as an example. Another example, Innovate BC has also created 100 paid internships with MyTax for small and medium tech companies that are building solutions in the COVID era. And Honourable Speaker, this question of localizing our supply chains is an important question that the new Innovation Commissioner is going to be looking at, and I'm very much looking forward to announcing who that person will be in the near future.
Leader, third party on a supplemental.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. COVID-19 has daylighted our lack of stockpiling and local production of personal protective equipment. The Minister mentioned it, or PPE. PPE is critical to protecting frontline workers, and we saw the devastating health consequences when we lack supply. BC has a lot of natural resources, much of which we export raw. This is not sustainable and forgoes many local potential jobs. Now more than ever, we need immediate job-creating measures. Coupling our abundance of natural resources with the strength, value-added industry will mean a more resilient economy and well-paying jobs for the future. Our forests could provide essential bioproducts such as masks, which will help transition the forestry industry and bring jobs to many hard-hit communities. Researchers at UBC have created a biodegradable and compostable N95 mask made entirely of BC wood fibers and will apply for Health Canada certification, shovel-ready, shovel-worthy. My question through you, Honourable Speaker, is to the Minister of Forest, Lands, Natural Resource Operations and Rural Development. The Minister has spoken about shifting the industry to value-added instead of volume. We haven't yet seen many concrete changes. What steps is the Minister taking to capitalize on the opportunities in bioproducts like masks and making it a reality for our forest industry?
Minister of Forests, Lands, Natural Resources and Rural Development.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker, and I welcome the question from the interim leader of the official or third party to discuss innovation in the forest sector. We definitely have a focus on adding value over volume on the use of the public resource, the forests of BC, and innovation is an important part of that. Unfortunately, the forest sector we inherited under the previous government had an over-concentration of tenure and a focus on traditional forest products, and those factors do not lead to stimulation of innovation. In Budget 2020, we allotted $13 million over the budget cycle to the new forest economy. That's to increase First Nations participation in the bioeconomy and to work on the supply side around fiber and access to fiber for innovators. And that gets to the point of the member's question. That access to fiber is absolutely essential for a company like Harmac Pacific, who I just spoke with the CEO and senior managers yesterday on the telephone. Harmac Pacific has doubled the supply of pulp that they provide to companies producing surgical gowns, for instance. And so that access to chips for that pulp is something that is important to innovators like Harmac Pacific, and we've taken measures to reduce waste in the forest and taken measures to drive logs to domestic production so that chips are available for the innovators and for the production of value-added products like surgical gowns and the pulp that goes into that. We've also worked with FP Innovations, and I believe the member's question when it referenced the biodegradable N95 mask that you
Thank you, Minister.
is something that's been through FP Innovation. So overall, this is important for workers, important for communities, and thank you very much, Madam Speaker.
So, Minister, thank you. I think we had a bit of a technical glitch there. Member Peace River North.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Parents and students have been patient as schools dealt with COVID-19 and managed the uncertainty of this past school year. But now they're getting anxious, and they want and expect the government to have a plan in place for this fall sooner than later. The Premier said that June was a trial run and that they learned from that. Now, parents are looking for direction. To the Minister of Education, will he provide students and parents with an action plan by August?
Minister of Education.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and I hope you can hear me. And I thank the member for the question. We have provided a plan for British Columbia, and it's exactly why we were one of the handful of jurisdictions in North America that was able to safely reopen schools in June. And I think that has provided us with a fantastic learning opportunity that is now being seized upon by the steering committee that I appointed for the September restart of schools. That steering committee has met a couple of times already. It is composed of the teaching profession, support staff, principals and vice principals, parent organizations, every stakeholder in the K-12 education system. And it furthers and builds upon the work that we've done as a government to have a collaborative approach to the complicated management of safe school operation during this pandemic. And I think British Columbia is now being regarded by a leader in jurisdictions across the world and close to us in the departments of education in Washington State, Oregon, and California. They're looking to the plans that we've already developed as a government here in British Columbia that safely guided our school system back to in-class instruction in June. The steering committee is working to provide information that will be public, that I will announce in the coming weeks, about what stage we will be in, what the features around health and safety protocols will look like, and what the school schedule will look like. But what we will always do as a government in the education system and across government is have a science-led approach. And the Provincial Health Office has to be congratulated for how it has worked with everybody in the education system to make what has happened possible, and that will guide us into the future.
Peace River North on a supplemental.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Surely the Minister, though, must understand that parents need a plan for the return of school in September. Numerous articles that are in the news have stated mid-August, August 20th, before a plan would be released. Parents obviously understand the impact of the pandemic, but the reality for families across British Columbia is they need to arrange childcare. They need to have a plan to pick up kids from different schools that they might attend, a plan for what kids are going to do on the days that they're not in the classroom. So it's not fair for families to only have a week or so to organize all of this. So it sounds like the minister's got a plan to get a plan, but families want some certainty for September. So again, to the minister, will he ensure that parents know the plan for the new school year by August?
Minister of Education.
Thank you, and I'm pleased to tell the member that closely guarded secret has been broadcast to every media organization that cared to cover me, that we will, in the next few weeks, be giving substantive information about what September looks like, but we will always have to check that and update transparently, as we do as a government, against the backdrop of pandemic management in British Columbia. We want to have a safe plan. Safety remains the paramount concern of our government. But we have published a stages document a couple of months ago. The member knows that. He's been briefed on that. So we've had a plan. It guided us in June. A version of it will guide us going forward in September. We have a collaborative plan. Every major organization has representation on the steering committee that is planning the safe reopening of schools in September. And look, we should be proud as a province to be so further ahead of other jurisdictions, having worked hard with 70,000 working men and women in the school system, hundreds of thousands of parents who are connected to parent advisory committees, to be able as a province to have done what other jurisdictions have only contemplated and not been able to achieve. But I am very happy to take a question from the opposition on this because, you know, back in April, the opposition said we couldn't open schools, and in May they said we shouldn't open schools, and in June they said we couldn't open schools, and we did all that. We did it safely, and look, the feedback has been overwhelmingly positive from those who participated in the voluntary return to school, and our plans going forward are ones that are being co-developed with every K-12 stakeholder and will be shared publicly in the very near future.
Member Richmond Queensborough.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Premier said the return to school in June was a trial run, and I can tell the Minister that certainly in my community in Richmond, the participation level I think was 35%. I'm not sure who's grading his class, but 35% generally would be considered a fail. So parents expect government to get involved and provide plans moving forward in the fall. Instead, the Minister is waiting until a week before school returns before providing details. Other provinces have provided clear plans that takes into account all contingencies. I have one of those plans from back east, Mr. Speaker, and there's information here on school attendance, school day routine, limits of students in classrooms, childcare, before and after programs, 22 pages of vital information, all available online to parents, Mr. Speaker. If other provinces can do it, why can't this government do it? So to the Minister of Education, why does he tell parents, students and teachers what the school plans are for this fall?
Minister of Education.
Question. They're very, very problematic, Mr. Speaker. As the member knows, we had a voluntary return to the school system because that's what was possible. And you know what they had in other provinces? They had a 0% return to school. We did very well, and all of those that were involved in this tremendous exercise, which took incredible hard work and thoughtfulness, and the guidance from the Provincial Health Office, the BC Centre for Disease Control, paid off in spades. We wanted vulnerable children to be reconnected to schools, and they were. We wanted those with special learning needs to be reconnected with schools, and they were as well. That opportunity was available to 100% of families, and families that felt that it was the right decision for their child at the time in June were able to take advantage of that. And look, the lessons and experiences from June are informing the September restart. We are ahead of other jurisdictions because of the work that we put in during the pandemic through the June restart. And I think that British Columbia, when you look at what other provinces and territories are inquiring of us, they're looking at our plans to develop their plans. And I think that's a testament to the leadership British Columbia has provided in Canada.
Member Richmond Queensborough on a supplemental.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We're hearing from across the province that there is no district level planning happening and that nothing is expected for weeks. Now the Minister says that they're ahead of other provinces. In Alberta, official plans will be announced by August 1st to parents. In Ontario, each school board is required to present a plan for schools to return by August 4th. In Quebec, schools planning to fully reopen in September. In Saskatchewan, schools will reopen fully on September 1st. That's a plan. Parents know that they can plan forward and know what's going to happen in September. Here's what education columnist Patty Backus had to say, quote, "The time to talk about solutions is now, not in late August. Parents need a plan," end quote. Again to the Minister of Education, why won't he tell parents what the plan is today for the fall?
Minister of Education.
To a previous question, and I know the member here is a former journalist, I said to his former colleagues, the press gallery and others who joined a briefing today, in fact, we will have a plan published in 3 weeks' time. What we have is a steering committee working right now composed of all of the stakeholders, including parent organizations, working on that plan. I think what you're seeing in other provinces is that they've announced dates, they've announced elements of what they are planning, and that's fine. We've done that as well. But when you look at the National Organization of Education Ministries in the country, British Columbia's leadership is well recognized. We've done what other jurisdictions have not. And look, we are committed, and we have behaved as a government in the most transparent fashion, giving people information that is real, that is well thought out, that is guided by science. And that's what we're going to continue to do in the most timely manner possible. And as I've committed to do, we will have a more accurate picture of what a return to school looks like in September in the coming weeks.
Member for Parksville-Qualicum.
Mr. Speaker, yesterday the Minister of Tourism tried to paint a rosy picture of the tourism sector's future, except the reality on the ground is quite different. Businesses are hurting. They can't afford to wait for the minister to stop talking and come up with a plan. They need support now, today. So here's a quote from John Wilson of Wilson Transportation. Quote, "With every passing day, it is getting tougher and tougher to see the light. Wilson's and the industry as a whole need something soon to make it through 2020, end quote. So to the Minister of Tourism, when can businesses expect a plan that provides them with support that they need to survive this crisis?
Minister of Tourism, Arts and Culture.
Thank you, Speaker, and I want to thank the member for the question because our government absolutely recognizes the value of tourism and how they've been hit extremely hard by the COVID-19 virus. Our tourism operators and I have been working very closely over the past 3 months. We are working with them on response, recovery, and resilience. We immediately, as a government, provided $5 billion in support. We reallocated funds and launched our domestic marketing campaign so that tourism operators can, have a summer season. We continue to protect and monitor our international markets because we know those spaces need to be protected because bookings come 18 months out usually. We continue to work with the sector towards recovery to hear what they want. We work with all the Tourism Industry Association of BC, the RDMOs, the sector associations, the businesses. We're working on resilience by focusing on destination development, by focusing on, Indigenous tourism. And, here's a quote for the member because we are working closely with the sector. We're going to continue to work closely with the sector. So this was a letter from the Tourism Industry Association of BC, which they provided yesterday morning. It's on behalf of the members, directors, and partners of the Tourism Industry Association of BC. I wish to express my sincere thanks for your leadership and support of BC's tourism industry as we continue to deal with the devastating impacts of COVID. And they go on to thank you again for championing the needs for tourism workers and businesses and communities throughout BC. So, Honourable Speaker, what we're going to continue to do is to work directly with the sector. What we're going to continue to do is discuss with them what they need for supports towards recovery, and we'll work together towards that. Thank you.
Member for Parksville-Qualicum on a supplemental. Sorry, Member Parksville-Qualicum on a supplemental. We seem to have a glitch technically. Perhaps we can come back to that, a supplemental question. Member for Columbia River Revelstoke.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And the people in the tourism sector are being very upfront and they've been very clear. They need support from the province and they need it immediately. They want a defined recovery plan that lays out what the next 18 months looks like. Other provinces have plans and are making significant investments to sustain the industry, yet BC, nothing. So to the Minister of Tourism, when will the Minister provide a recovery plan that the sector is desperately asking for?
Minister.
Thank you so much, Speaker. And, it's really unfortunate that the members are painting this picture. We continue to work with the sector, and we continue. We have already secured and provided investments, and we will continue to do that. We provided $10 million in marketing money for community destination marketing organizations. We provided $400,000 to the tourism associations, so that they can have marketing plans ready. We provided $130,000 to visitor network services. We provided, money for smaller CDMOs to work with Destination BC. We know that the tourism sector has been significantly hit. We have worked with them to address their concerns to date, including wholesale prices of alcohol, pieces like that. And we're going to keep working with them together, moving towards a recovery in the future. And so I'm going to continue, as I have been for the past 3 months, working extremely closely with the sector and with the direct businesses to hear what it is they need. Thank you.
The bell ends question period.